I'm Corinne Schaefer, and welcome to Create Outside the Box. In this episode, I will be speaking with the founders of the international opera band, The Cast, Bryn and Campbell Vertesi, about why they love the art form, being innovative in a traditional performing arts genre, and what they see for the future of opera. If you're interested in watching our conversation, please visit our Creative Operations YouTube channel under the playlist, Create Outside the Box. When the enthusiastic international opera band, The Cast, takes the stage, they share a passion for creating something wonderful right then and there. They take the old genre of opera apart and reassemble it into something shiny and new, taking it places it hasn't been, at least not recently. Founded by Bryn and Campbell Vertesi, The Cast mixes opera and entertainment, connecting the audience to the music through superhuman singing and pure fun. The artists come together to celebrate opera and share stories about their diverse connections to the music. So I want to give a big warm welcome to Bryn and Campbell Vertesi to Create Outside the Box. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
All right, so this is a little crazy because the two of you are some of my longest friends. So it's kind of strange like interviewing you because we've known each other forever. We studied at the same school, Indiana University, where we studied voice.
Studied with the same teacher, then you became my best friend, then you were my maid of honor at my wedding, then I convinced you to move to Germany.
So we're casual acquaintances.
Exactly. What was your name again?
Exactly. And you two have been an important part of my life. And yeah, it's just been a crazy, crazy wild ride. And I just thought, like, when I was coming up with the idea of doing the podcast, I really knew that at some point I wanted to interview you guys because you've done some really extraordinary things with opera. And opera can kind of have a bad rap. You know, I actually had a meeting once. No,
What?
Seriously. What?
You're kidding me.
No, but like opera can have a bad rap. I had a meeting once with a producer and we were talking about marketing a new show. And he was like, I don't know if you want to describe it as opera. Like that could be like marketing death. And
when did opera become this bad word?
I think it's when we made it so deadly boring that nobody manages to stay awake even through a single act.
Or too expensive for anyone to be able to do unless they had already a very successful career.
Actually,
Exactly.
So we encountered the same the marketing poison effect, and I'm that kind of nerd. So if you're interested, there's a real music history specific point where opera became boring and elitist and quiet. Only if you're interested. I'm not going to monopolize the podcast with music history. That's your next podcast.
And
right?
I don't know if anyone else would actually call opera quiet ever.
It's quiet for the audience.
so, taking all of that into consideration of like that there are all of these negative stereotypes about opera and what opera is, how did you guys fall in love with the art form and what made you want to become opera singers?
You go first.
Well, it's going to sound a little cheesy, but I fell in love with opera. Oh, it's really hard to say. There's a couple of reasons why I fell in love with opera. One was because I actually heard Maria Callas. And let's face it, as a girl listening to opera, all you have to do is hear Maria Callas and it's like, bam, you are hooked. She's amazing. It's breathtaking. It's mesmerizing. And all I could think was, how is she doing that? But when I think about what got me into opera or what kept me in opera, kind of silly to say, it was a guy. And sorry, honey, it's not you. You were not the first.
Nobody gets excited about opera because of a bass.
But I remember seeing this guy sing when I was in university, and I was like gobsmacked. I just was completely drawn and like lost all sense of time and anyone else in the room, and just thought, oh my gosh.
Sploosh.
That's hot, but yeah. So.
I had a director once who said, everybody who's into opera, even and probably especially the crustiest old bitchy opera fan who complains about everything, everybody who's into opera had a moment of inspiration like that from some singer that got them that excited. Some Maria Callas or Leontine Price or Cesare Siepi. I just gotta hope that there's a bass out there somewhere. And your job as a musician is to reignite that spark, to recreate that moment and that level of excitement. And the lack of that excitement is the thing that makes them old and crusty and crabby all the time.
No, that's exactly true, because I have to say, for me, it was Joan Sutherland, because my mom got me these CDs that Pavarotti had put together, these albums of like opera for children. So it had, Tales of Hoffmann and Hansel and Gretel. And I remember like listening to it and being transported. And when I heard Joan Sutherland sing the doll song, I was like, what is that? Like, even though there was no visual, I could hear them winding her up and her then dying down. And then they had to wind her up again. And I was like, I want to do that. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, I want to be a wind-up doll. No, I have bigger aspirations, but you know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right. Like, these are the artists that inspire us and kind of, challenge us to step in their very big shoes to keep this art form going.
I saw the movie Pretty Woman at quite a ridiculously young age. Probably not a film that your parents should be showing you. But to be honest, the thing that excited me the most were the scenes when he took her to the opera where she saw Traviata. And they do this kind of montage of all the best moments of Traviata. And I think as a kid, basically, I ceased to remember any other part of that movie other than the musical moment and that montage of Traviata that I could literally sing from beginning to end over and over again because it just captured me.
Yeah.
No, I grew up with a lot of classical music in my family. My father is an amateur pianist and would play all the time, and we could sit around the piano and draw, and we just had this all in our environment. But it was always music that you make in a casual, friendly environment, often with people playing duets or whatever. And what got me into opera was the first time I heard a recording of somebody who just let loose that way. Yeah. I'd been to the opera many times with my school, and I'd enjoyed the productions. I remember a couple of productions with directors and conductors that I later got to work with that were really cool, but it didn't really grab me until I heard somebody who could just completely drop the pretension and sing to you like they're speaking to you. Actually, it was Robert Merrill. There's some fantastic videos of him on the old Firestone Hour, where he doesn't do anything elaborate. There's no fancy staging. He just looks you in the eye and is so charming, you can't look away. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, the best performers are storytellers. They're the ones that are able to connect, tell a story, and authentically. And Robert Merrill is a great artist, so you're absolutely right. Besides the singers that make opera so exciting, what is it about opera in general that you love? And what do you think distinguishes it from other performing arts genres?
What I think is unique about opera is the way it brings together all of the dramatic arts in one place. The same way musical theater does, and it's captivating for a lot of the same reasons that really great musical theater is. And you lay on top of that the fact that the pieces of opera that we mostly perform today are ones that have entertained audiences for generations. 5 generations of people have walked out of a theater humming Toreador, la, 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 la. 5 generations of people. There is something universally appealing to this. And you add on top of that it's one of the musical arts that really thrives on how deep it can be. Right. And there are lots of musical arts like that. Jazz is another big one for me, where you can dive into any given piece and there is a lifetime of depth in there. Yeah. And that is the expectation for a large majority of classical music. So I think you have the combination that you bring together lots of different entertaining arts into something that has lots of hooks to grab you, and then an infinite amount of nerd fodder for you to go deeper in and get more excited about. So I think it's pretty ultimate musical art form in that sense.
I also think that the stories that are told through opera, these are not old themes. These are actually themes that are still relevant today. You boy meets girl, boy loses girl, other guy tries to steal girl. Dad's mad, doesn't want her to date the guy. Then
Well,
in
they
the
are
end,
they are old themes. They're the oldest
that's
themes.
true.
They're
but these themes are still prevalent in the stories that we tell today. When we
they're
think
universal.
about, they're universal. They're timeless. So I think it actually, a lot of the negativity that we've seen or negative stereotypes that have developed around opera almost have to do with this idea that we have to present them in this very old and traditional fashion rather than just telling the story with really good music.
You know, classic stories like boys attacked by a dragon. The dragon is killed by 3 magic ladies, meets a birdman, you know, the usual kind of stuff.
So that reference was definitely Mozart's The Magic Flute. And there's also a lot of fantasy and fun that is in opera that I don't think people really realize. Like, I think there's a whole untapped audience of Lord of the Rings fans who would love Wagner's Ring Cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
But the trick is we're going to get back to why opera is marketing poison. We have to pull our collective heads out of our asses in order to tell the ring in a way that would appeal to anybody who doesn't have one foot in the grave already. And there is one particular moment, I'm dying to tell the music history story here, so this is what you're going to get.
Go ahead.
There's one particular moment, which is when Wagner at one point was conducting The Ring, and he was conducting at Bayreuth, his own theater, and The Ring in the very, very beginning of the first movie of the Ring cycle, the first opera of the Ring cycle, it starts with very quiet, really, really low notes. It's supposed to be at the bottom of the Rhine River, and it slowly, slowly builds into the biggest, loudest, most epic G chord you've ever heard, with everything undulating like the waves. It's a gorgeous, wonderful, amazing moment, and one that audiophiles use to test their speakers because it starts so quiet and small. And here's Wagner conducting the very beginning, and people are talking in the audience. And at the time, that wasn't terribly unusual. You know, you could talk during an opera. It was a social thing. But still, when it started, you'd be quiet for a second and listen and hopefully get pulled in by this particular moment, right? And Wagner tried to keep his cool, and finally turned around and just blew up and just yelled at the audience, "Would you please be quiet?" And then he started again, and everyone was quiet. And we're getting partway through the act now, and he's going, "Why is nobody talking?" You know, and the conductor's facing this way. The audience is behind him. He's going, "Have people left? I mean, what's going on? I don't hear anything." Yeah. And he came out at intermission and tried to explain, no, I just meant for that part. You just have to be quiet for that part. But it was too late. The damage was done. And we have lots of his letters that he wrote to relatives, to other composers, complaining about how audiences learned to shut up and be quiet at his pieces, and he felt like they weren't enjoying themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Wagner.
Right. It's all Wagner's fault. I mean, the other big person is Mahler, but, you know, Mahler's music, he wrote about life and death. It literally has a song cycle about dead children.
Right.
It's not the kind of thing that you're chattering through. You know, it's not a la, 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 ha, ha, ha kind of thing.
But see, I actually see it a little differently. I think, honestly, part of my problem with opera is I don't see exactly how we set this art form in modern time. For example, in the 1800s, when you only had live performance art to go to commit to going to a 6-hour opera in the theater like Parsifal was no big deal, because what else were you going to do on a Saturday or Sunday, right? I think part of the problem now is that we have to communicate this to modern audiences, where for them, their art can come to them in bite-sized chunks, such as 15-second or 30-second videos on TikTok. So I'm trying to understand, where is the line between holding on to what is true to this art form and what is important with this art form, and understanding that we have to adapt to kind of modern intake of information and entertainment.
Well, Parsifal's an extreme example. It's literally the longest opera ever written, right? But wait. Like lots of Mozart would go out and do a run of Magic Flute, or do a run of Giovanni, and be back home in 2 hours, 45 minutes. I can't believe we know that, but that's the kind of stuff the music historians learn from their letters, right? 2.5 hours is not a crazy length for a movie. How many hours have we spent binge watching any given Netflix series. I think it's not an invalid point, but it's not the be all and end all, right? We're definitely used to tiny bite-sized bits of entertainment, and that's not what this was written for.
Yeah, but it also has to do with the pacing. I mean, a film that is made to be 2 hours and 45 minutes has a different pacing than an opera that's 3 hours. I'm sorry, but there are huge chunks of operas. Let's talk about Così. Beautiful moments filled with chunks of, who was it? Who was it who said? Mozart. I'm kidding.
Who was it who said? He was talking about Wagner. When he said Wagner has beautiful moments, but really boring hours.
Jeez.
It's true, right? That's the case when you're taking any older entertainment form and anything that was created for an older time. The pace of our entertainment is so much faster now. It's the case even when you look at older movies. Movies with pacing from the 80s are totally identifiable.
Totally different.
And that's 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a problem, but I don't know that entire pieces presented in one sitting in their entirety is, at least not to me, a key part of what makes opera.
Okay. Now, both of you are very passionate about opera. We can tell from this conversation. And both of you...
It's a hobby.
Not to mention just very, very opinionated.
No, but you know, you were auditioning, you were doing shows, you were doing operas, but at some point, you know, some of the points that you laid out, you realized there were certain aspects of the art form and also the industry that were problematic. And at some point you decided to create your own path. So like, when did you decide to forge your own path in the opera industry? And what was the motivation for that?
Well, all roads were leading to Germany, because anyone who was graduating from university in music, who was trying to get a career started, all roads were pointing to Germany, because Germany was Mecca for classical music and opera.
Something like, at the time that we moved here, something like 45% of all opera productions worldwide happened in Germany.
Yeah.
Right? An enormous majority.
So we ended up finding ourselves here and actually working for one of the smaller theaters in the ensemble as a fest member in the core ensemble. And I just remember going home and thinking, I'm not enjoying this. Like, it's not fun anymore. It's like all of a sudden when you turn your love for music into like a 9-to-5 job, all of a sudden it ceases being fun or inspirational. I don't know.
Do you remember we went to see an opera at one of the national theaters in Germany. So really well-funded theater, good singers, good musicians and everything. And I remember we came back and just said, it felt like watching people at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
Like they were really
opera.
just there to punch their time card.
Just phoning it in, really phoning it in. And I just thought it's such a shame, because this music is so incredible. It's so inspiring. Where is that?
It's exciting. It's fun. And like,
I myself am not inspired, and I actually studied this. So what do I expect from my audience? And that's when I remember I kept up Cam countless hours at night, just chugging the same problem about trying to start our own theater, or my own theater, which I always wanted to do, because I also discovered in that time that I didn't want to be just a singer. I had spent some time in my university actually taking on other roles in the production process. So I actually was an assistant stage manager. I actually was a director. I was an assistant conductor for one of the productions, which was absolutely ridiculous. But I found that I liked being a part of the holistic creative process. And then I thought, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to be happy being just a singer. I really want to be a part of something more. So one night when we were up until 3 a.m. and I kept on banging my head against the same financial problems as every theater has, Cam said to me, well, what if we take the theater completely out of it? What if we're not fixed to one location? What if we built something more like a band? Yeah. And I thought,
I think one of the key points there is that Bryn got a taste of being a part of the creative part of a production. And it's funny to say that, but a lot of the jobs that you get, I will say almost all of the jobs that you get as an opera singer, you are not particularly creative. You are there to interpret somebody else's vision. You have a conductor whose job is to have a musical vision that you are going to execute. And you have a director whose job is to have a dramatic vision that you are going to execute. And really the priority is placed on you're being a faithful and facile executor. And that's true until you get to really, really the top rungs of the industry. When you have a Pavarotti in your production, he can say what he wants to do with the character, and everybody goes, yeah, right. But for all the rest of the unwashed masses of singers, they're never asked to do that. And I think once you get a taste of that artistic, that being an artist, it's very hard to get it out of your mind. I had a phenomenal conductor when I sang at Sarasota Opera, actually. And he kept saying over and over again, no, you guys, you're sounding like a CD. And I don't want the La Traviata that I can buy off of a shelf. I want the La Traviata with Campbell Vertesi and with you. And I want all of your unique sounds. And I was in the chorus in La Traviata, you know. I was literally one of 50 voices. One
of those unwashed masses.
Really, like if you're going to think anybody is there to just faithfully do what they're told, it should be the chorus, right? But here at this opera house, they said, no, everybody coaches their lines individually. Everybody should have musical opinions about what they're doing, and they have to be compatible. But that's also a part of the work. And from that really changed my perspective. What I expected when I got a role. I would arrive to first rehearsal with already opinions about my characters, and being not just willing, but expecting to be able to discuss those in an open way with the director, like some kind of co-creator, which is not a very successful tactic in the opera, in entertainment in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, all of entertainment, there are so many people trying to get in. Just the labor market is that there are 50 people lined up behind you to take your spot. So in any industry, it's going to be like that, where your job is to say, yes, sir, and how high, sir.
Yeah, and it's hard as an artist because Bryn's absolutely right. Once you get a bite of having some creative control over your product and getting to explore and getting to have fun, then when you're put into a production or whatever you're working on where you're just a cog in the machine. I mean, there's nothing more deathly to the arts or to a performer than making them just feel like a cog and not like an actual living, breathing person.
Yeah.
I know so many artists, not just in opera, musical theater too. They're so excited to do these productions. And then they end up experiencing burnout or a lack of passion for what they got into this art form in the first place, because it totally dehumanizes them in some way.
Well, and there is a bit of disrespect that can happen in a lot of the arts that is, frankly,
a little bit.
You would never accept it in any other industry. But I will say, I think there is something to what we're saying that is not particular to opera, and that is in any industry. When you are a worker and you have a manager, for example, you want to work for someone that you respect. You want to work for someone who you think is competent at their job. And you want to work for someone who you think is better than you, who can teach you how to move to that next step and can inspire you to keep on doing what you're doing. And unfortunately, just like in any job, in a performance art like opera, you can find yourself working for people who don't reach those bars. And it was just happened on more than a couple of occasions where I was working for people who not only didn't inspire me, not only didn't inspire me, but they didn't even particularly care about opera themselves and didn't even seek to try and love it. They were just there. They were just there for a paycheck. And I think, why are you here? And what are you doing to my art? It literally felt like a personal insult to me as the musician trying to present their quote unquote vision.
I want to speak to what you just said there, Corinne, about the difference between being an individual and a cog in the machine. And we started this conversation with our inspiring moments, and every opera lover has some moment when they saw Leontine Price and Maria Callas or somebody amazing like that, who really made this spark come alive, and they made them want to get out of their seats and just go, yeah, somebody who made that moment. And that person was not a cog in a machine.
No.
And that person was not created by being a cog in a machine. Just the opposite. And in fact, this industry environment actively kills the process that you need to create those artists and to create those moments. It's something that I think is a really serious problem that we don't think about in the music industry enough. And it is just the same in a lot of popular music genres. I say as if opera isn't incredibly popular. We all know opera is popular music.
We're a big piece of that pie.
Right? But it's the same in a lot of other music genres as well, you know, the ones that get really, really manufactured. You know, there are people for whom that's their only experience of music, is the really manufactured stuff, the stuff that not only doesn't touch you here, it isn't even supposed to touch you here. It's not supposed to move you in a particular way, except to hit the like button nowadays.
I mean, it's unfortunately become...
But that kills it. That kills it in any genre, right?
Yeah.
In rock music, it's if you want to do something experimental, whoa, it's hard. If you want to challenge the musical norms the way like Pink Floyd did, oh, good luck. Good luck. For that, you don't get created by the process that is at work right now in a lot of popular music.
Yeah. And what I'm getting from all of this and those late nights that you were trying to figure out, like, okay, how do we get the spark back? Like, how do we get the spark back for ourselves? How do we create opportunities where other singers can get their spark back? And let's get the spark back for the audience, because we want the audience to get as excited about this music as we are. And that's where I think that your concept of like, all right, theater, like, oh, well, opera has to be in a theater. No, Cam was right. It doesn't have to be in a theater. Opera has to just be, you know, performers doing one specific production. No. Why don't we make them a band? You know, why is a band only a rock band or a blues band? Why can't there be an opera band? You know, and that was what I thought was so cool and radical. And then coming up with the name, which I think, Bryn, you came up with the name, The Cast. That was so cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what it was. Sometimes I just land on something and it kind of sticks with me. This is why I have children named Han and Lando, because it started as a joke and then it just kind of stuck because we didn't like anything better. And that is sort of how it came to be with the cast. What I wanted to communicate with the name was that it was an equal part group. That every person, just like when you think of a cast of a really great show like Friends or Sex and the City or something like that, it was like the Three Tenors meets Sex and the City, the Three Tenors meets Friends. You wanted to communicate that same kind of connection with the individuals who were a part of the band, so that there was this,
And I think also the casual backstage feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And because a part of the idea came from the parties that we would have, right? We're humans. This is amazing. Classical musicians also party. And the difference is when a bunch of classical musicians drink and there's a piano nearby, people end up making music. There's going to be singing. There's going to be people playing pieces that they love, that they think are fun and cool, and trying different things with them and experimenting. And, you know, it turns into a jam fest, like any set of musicians when they're partying. And we looked at each other and said, well, why do we never share that atmosphere? Why do we never share that really relaxed and casual sense of honest fun and passion in the music? It's not complicated.
No, so that really actually then became kind of the kernel when we started to build our shows, is that became the kernel of what we wanted to capture in the shows that we built.
Absolutely.
So your international opera band, The Cast, is doing exactly what you guys were talking about. It's reuniting that spark. It's about breaking down all of these ideas about what opera is and like what opera should be and showing people what it can be, which is fun. So why is this mission so important to you?
I mean, I'm an engineer apart from being an opera singer. And so for me, it's because they're wrong. They're wrong. They just don't know that this is music like every other kind of music. And if you just relax and have fun with it, it is fun. It's okay. It really, that's what it comes down to. And I didn't know growing up that my perspective on classical music was a unique one, right? This whole thing of growing up with it in a really relaxed environment, making it with friends.
Yeah.
I never understood when I got to college. I never understood why did it have to be so formal with all this bullshit built up around it. I mean, it's nice sometimes to wear a suit, sure, sometimes, but hell, the other 90% of the time, I just like to make music like a human. And as an audience member, I greatly prefer watching a human make music and connect with me. And that's the case whether I'm an audience member for opera, for whatever, rock, soul, jazz, rap, any kind of music. It's all the same in that it's about honest human connection.
So I've actually been grappling with this question for myself of why do I do opera and why do I feel that it is an art form worth saving or it is a musical genre worth saving? And that's been a really hard question for me to answer because a lot of it comes down to the very selfish point that I just love this. I love singing it. I love the way it makes me feel when I listen to it, when I sing it and communicate this, when I basically scream on pitch and can affect or evoke some sort of emotion in someone else to communicate a message. And what I found in a lot of my experience with going to operas was there was always this very buttoned up version that was done that was sort of this, the proverbial fourth wall that really kind of separates the audience. And it's not a conversation. You're just simply viewing something.
Yeah.
And when I started to think of this music more conversational, and when we, the cast, take our pieces out of context, we take them out of the opera and out of their full story, we then have the opportunity to tell the story we want to tell with these pieces. I actually went through a period where I almost gave up singing because I had a horrible developmental experience and essentially lost a lot of my abilities and then had to retrain. And I did. I moved to a new city. I got a job painting houses just because there was a teacher I wanted to work with there, and ended up paying him all of the money I made from painting houses that summer just to study with him. And one of the pieces that he performed most in his career was Rigoletto. So his passion for this music was what inspired me and reignited it in me. So of course, learning Rigoletto with him, I was singing Gilda and thus singing Caro Nome. And to sing music with someone who is so passionate about it with their entire being, you can't help but be transported and transformed by that. And I just knew that the way he made me feel and the way that he brought me to want to continue performing this music was exactly why I felt completely compelled to continue doing it as a performer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that sensation of when there's somebody who's really passionate and opening their heart and sharing their honest passion and love for this music with you, I think audience members get that also. When you sing in an American style theater, it's 2,000 or 3,000 seats. People are really far away from you. There's a disconnect that's a bit hard to get over regardless. But in Europe, the houses are a lot smaller. I mean, like an order of magnitude smaller. They're 500 houses is a big theater.
Yeah.
And whenever you sing in that kind of a more intimate environment, it's more like when you sing in someone's living room. You open your mouth, the first note comes out, and everyone in the room goes, oh. Like, what? I didn't know what? I didn't know they could do that, right? It's this, you're flabbergasted and but it takes the honest connection with the human being for that to work. If you stand there and are extra formal about it and up your own ass, as I like to say, the connection isn't nearly as strong. And it's the same when we're on stage. And I believe at the core of my being, classical music is for everyone, and that music is better shared. That means shared, meaning you make it together and that it's shared with the audience, that they're a part of that experience as well. And it's exactly all reaching that shared passion moment that you're talking about.
I mean, I think about my time in school. Why did I do music? Probably because I had an experience with a teacher who inspired me in a way that my other teachers didn't. Because I really believe that you can learn to love anything when you talk to someone who is passionate about it. I mean, I never cared about astronomy, but then you listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson and you get completely transported into this incredible universe, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
This incredible universe.
Exactly. I mean, I live with a guy who is by all intents and purposes an engineer and in IT. And I'm sorry, I don't really have a lot of passion for IT, but when he starts getting excited about something, I can't help but get excited with him. So I think that whatever that thing is that you get excited about, I want to be the person on the other side getting someone excited. Yeah. I want the cast to be that vessel, that catalyst for that first exciting experience with opera.
Yeah, it's infectious. And it's so funny because my next question is how you guys are breaking down the stereotypes about opera. And we'll get to that. But as we're talking, it's like, all you guys are really doing is like, hey, let's get back to the kernel of what opera actually is, which is it's beautiful music, a great story, inspiration, and excitement for everyone. You're not reinventing the wheel. You're actually like deconstructing it to its core and saying, without all of these trappings, this is what this is. Let's get to the basic definition.
I think that's
name of our
right.
Next show, Deconstructed Opera.
Deconstructed Opera. I would actually I would take it even further, because it's not always beautiful, and it's not always emotionally touching. Right? There's every color of the rainbow there. It's really, for me, more fundamentally about what is music. Yeah. And classical music is, for all the bullshit we build around it, classical music is music just like everything else. And music is about connection, an honest human-to-human connection. And you can connect about ha 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 la la la, having a great time. You can connect about, oh my gosh, this person is dying on stage, or this is a really sad moment. You can connect in a really intellectual level, like this is something that Wagner really plays to. That wrote huge treatises explaining one song and why he chose every word. There are lots of different ways that you can connect, but music is about connection. Real human connection.
So besides being radical and just,
I'm sorry, did you just say besides being radicals? I like that.
I said, because beside being radical in this idea of like, opera's just another type of music that should be enjoyed. I know this shouldn't be radical, but it kind of is when you're thinking about opera. How else are you breaking down these stereotypes? How else are you waking up these audiences to let them know, hey, this is just another form of music that you can enjoy?
This is something that we're really intentional about, actually, because it's a big step to just drop all the pretense and pretension and just be and have fun on stage. But to communicate to the audience, when we've gone to other people's shows as research, which, believe it or not, we do. I keep notes on my phone. It drives Bryn crazy.
He does.
We write down what are the cues here that told the audience that it was okay to relax, it was okay to cheer, or that this was a dramatic moment or a serious moment. So, for example, we saw André Rieu when he came to our city. André Rieu, in America, you might know him from PBS specials. He's the guy who has an orchestra that's all dressed in bright colors, and they play, and there's always old people in the audience who get up and dance. And, I thought, well, it's hokey. It's not the same target audience that we have, but here's somebody who's bringing the music to life, at least in some ways. So we went. And he was very intentional about it. So everybody's wearing bright colors. The orchestra files in through the audience. They've already broken your expectation about where you should be. You start the whole show with a feeling of, oh, I didn't expect that there. And the music is all around you. They had a light show that was going on. They had laser lights for part of it. They had projections for part of it.
He talked with the audience. He actually talked between every piece. It was, and very casually. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like a good presenter does. I mean, at the time, I wrote down, it's like watching when David Letterman would introduce the featured musical act. Right. It's not, and here are the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Here's a fantastic band. I'm a huge fan of their music. That every time I hear it, I just can't stop tapping my feet. That bass line is so badass. Here's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And you're already excited, right? He primes you. Yeah. So we took notes. I have pages and pages of notes. And we figured out, well, what can we work into our show when? So we start the show with a very formal moment. The lights are flat white, like it's going to be the most boring concert you've ever seen, with a piano on stage. And one of us steps on stage, dressed as formally as any of us ever are, and says, ladies and gentlemen, this is a classical music show. And we'd like you to please pay attention to the rules. First of all, photos and videos. Absolutely, all the time. Please make sure your mobile phone is turned on. You can take photos, but make sure when you post them during the show, and here's the hashtag to use, right? And then we go through the whole thing of, this is actually explicitly how you're going to behave. We found it's really helpful if we lead the audience in a cheer at the beginning. Like, we're just going to practice. Somebody's going to sing a high note, and you are going to cheer, and we're going to go, yeah, give us more. Yeah, it's amazing, right?
Essentially, we're telling them, forget anything you think you know about opera, because this night or this experience is going to be completely different.
Yeah. And we intentionally try and warm them into it. It also is built into how we structure our show. We think about, how do we teach the audience how they are expected to behave here, because it is different. So the first number, right after they've done that cheering practice, we have a number that's got to introduce all of us. It's got to be high energy. And there've got to be individual solo moments for everybody. And we on the stage are also going to cheer each other on, because that's an indicator to the audience, right?
I know you use this word teach, but I think it's almost even more important to say that we are showing them how we are allowing them to behave in our concert, because it really is, we want it to be like you are going to a rock concert or any other music event that's not a classical music event, because I think somehow through time, we've just bred this out, that we don't actually get to express when something has really been amazing or deserves a big clap. So we want to allow our audience to simply enjoy this music as they want to.
Mm-hmm. So we'll pick a number that comes early in this. There's always a number that comes early in the show that's got really showy solos, what the opera people call colorature. And we're all on stage cheering like crazy every time somebody does one of these rock guitar solos for the voice. And the audience, of course, they join in and they really start to get into the feeling of it. We noticed that with opera music, because the sound is really beautiful, it's easy for audiences to get sucked into that. And they will then get quiet. And it's fine. There are numbers where that's what you want, right? When you're singing a ballad, it's not a great time. You know, nobody's in the middle of Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven going, yeah, Tears in Heaven, man.
That would also be a bit inappropriate.
Right? That would also be inappropriate. Yeah. So it's fine for parts, but then we have to think, all right, well, how are we going to perk things back up again? We try and break the rules of what people expect a lot. So we'll have numbers with subtitles that are holding up cue cards with the subtitles that are making fun of the piece the whole time, right? Yeah. Just breaking the expectation that this should somehow be a holy music written by somebody who's so highfalutin he shits marble, as Mozart said. We have LED lights. We have all sorts of stuff.
That's a lot already.
I know it's a lot, but she can cut one.
And there's more.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. And like you were saying, like you're very deliberate about all of this. You guys have given this a lot of thought. There's a structure to it. So when it comes to creating these shows and making sure that the audience knows that they have permission to express themselves and be part of it. When you're trying to be innovative and imaginative, how do you come up with the structure of your show? How do you come up with your show themes? How do you build something that you think is going to just invite everybody into this kind of fun world?
A lot of late night parties. No, I'm just kidding.
Drugs.
Just kidding.
Just lots and lots of drugs, man.
Living like rock stars.
It's a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah.
Just like any creative process. If you're going to go give a talk at a conference, how do you think of what's going to be an interesting thing for you to talk about?
I mean, honestly, even the development of the way we develop our shows has evolved through time. I mean, before we kind of fell into our first one, we had a lot of great ideas, but they weren't necessarily always executed in the most intentional ways. So it took a while for us to kind of figure out what worked on stage, what worked with our audience, and what our audience is, and what made us unique as a band. Eventually, we went from having a very, very intensive time together where we would go away together as a group for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and decide this is going to be our creative time. We're building here. And by the end of this, we're going to have a show. That, I think, had its own limitations because it's really hard to let yourself kind of simmer on an idea and evolve it and build upon it with others when you have that kind of time constraints. Yeah. So what we started since our last show is, we started having more regular creative times, as we call them, where there's not really a goal. There's not a time constraint other than we're meeting this afternoon. But the idea is that we're going to come together and we're just going to play. We're just going to play with music. And maybe something comes of it. Maybe we get an idea from it. Hey, in the best case, we get a piece from it. But no matter what, we're just going to come to this space where there's no questions asked. Whatever you want to try, give it a try. We'll do it. And maybe it'll make the show, maybe it won't. And I think this has really allowed for the rest of our team, for all of the different diverse ways in which they think and are creative and contribute to have a more even field across our group of contributions so that we can build a show that truly does come from every single one of us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we actually use a bunch of different techniques and we come at it from different directions, and it ends up being a combined work of lots of these things. Coming up with a theme. Yeah. I mean, we sit around and we shoot the shit, and sometimes it comes up after a show. I think our current show, No Limits, I think if I remember right, the idea first came at an after show party, right? We're hanging around in a hotel room, drinking and hanging out and relaxing because it's been a hell of a tour. And somebody throws out there, oh, No Limits. That sounds like an awesome band name. No, it should be the name for the next show.
Right.
Right. And then you follow up and go, well, what would that mean? We had some sessions where we sat down with the whole team, with the whole cast, and said, all right, so what does No Limits mean to you? What do you think what is your limit? And how can we break that? And then, okay, maybe that wasn't perfectly fruitful. Let's try from a different direction. Another thing that we did, Bryn mentioned that it's like the cast of Friends, right? Where we have this group of individuals. It really helps us to be intentional about who we are on stage, right? Each one of us. What
is our role compared to our colleague or our friend that we're standing with?
Yeah.
And it's not to say that we assign a role that has nothing to do with you. In fact, what we're doing is we're finding what is the kernel of who you are. What is that part of you that you want to show on stage? And how do we turn that up?
Or what is the part that you do show? I mean, for me, sure. I think about I think about the Backstreet Boys, where, some of it was just from their personalities. Nick is just kind of like that compared to, I can't remember anybody else's name now.
There's the boy next door, the heartthrob, the bad boy.
Right.
And we literally go around and talk about what are kind of our character names, but it is.
And those were constructed. Right. And for us, it's the other way around, but we're looking for, okay, so we each have a show nickname.
Do you want to share your nickname?
I'm all right to share my nickname.
All right.
I'm all right. And in some of these exercises, we have a little name tag. So we only call each other by our show nickname. I am Sir Daddy because I'm like everybody's dad, but I also, there's a certain, what do you want to say? Respectfulness in the way I treat my colleagues. Bryn, what was your name again?
I thought we landed on Lady Madonna.
Lady Madonna, that was right. That's
because it was combining the sort of badass female with that regal nature, which has kind of just been inbred and ingrained in me through years and years of presenting and Miss America competition. So
yeah, we have sweet punk, we have the comedian, we have
comedian.
The comedian. That's
Crasper.
right.
Or
Kraspar, yeah, that's
German.
right. That's right. This is a German pun. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, our tenor is the Nassmacher, the wet maker. So we do a bunch of different kinds of activities, and then you piece it together and you come up with individual pieces that you know are really strong, right? And you try
based
and fit
them. Based on this theme.
So, sometimes based on the theme. Sometimes it's just, this is a piece that I think is badass.
Yeah.
That I think is really cool and we really want to fit it in here, or this is a piece that is an audience favorite and we really want to fit it in there. And you try and make a through line with it. Sometimes we'll plot it out on a whiteboard. We'll draw, this is a high point, this is a low point. They're all useful tools, but yeah.
So in discussing like how you come up with these ideas and concepts for the shows, it's very clear that your team members are also a very key part of coming up with all of these different concepts. And your group, the cast, is made up of a group of international musicians. And I find that really exciting because you have different people with different personalities, but also they come from different cultures. How does that add to the group? What do they bring to the table? What have you found with working with so many diverse musicians?
Well, diversity is nothing but a positive, because it expands your breadth of ideas, your breadth of experiences, your breadth of knowledge. And in fact, it is exponential, the kind of ideas and creative input we can get from such a diverse team of musicians.
I mean, it's also a challenge sometimes. It's definitely a net positive, but
yes.
Anybody who works in an intercultural environment is going to experience the similar kind of challenges we do. There are some cultures where time has a very different meaning and they show up exactly on the hour. And there are other cultures where it's okay to show up 5 minutes later. And there's some cultures where it's okay to be half an hour late. And, you have to work around that kind of stuff. Expectations around how do you ask somebody to do something? How direct do you need to be? How explicit, all that stuff. But that's the same as in any line of work. Overall, and in a creative line especially, Bryn said it exactly right. It's exponential, the improvement in the kind of ideas we can generate.
And much as we didn't really see it this way, we've turned into a very democratic group of individuals. What we've decided is to come up, actually, it's been really perfect because it's trying to handle some of these traps that you can fall into when you've worked with someone for so long. You kind of forget that you come from different cultures. You forget that this person does not think about things the way you do. Mm-hmm. So what we decided to do as a group is kind of come up with our own set of rules, almost, what would you call them? Like, it's not the stone tablets, but
the commandments. I mean,
your commandments.
My,
it's like
my
the
teams
cast
at work do
commandments,
that. My teams at work, we actually come up with explicitly, this is our way of working document. Exactly. These are the basics about what we expect from each other.
Exactly.
And if it's not covered there, then it's fair game and maybe we'll add it later.
Right.
What do you find are the audience's reactions to the cast and to these shows? Do you find that you blow their minds open? Do you find that it changes what their perception is towards classical music and opera?
Yeah. My absolute favorite response that we have gotten on more than one occasion from audience members is, that was opera?
Yeah.
I didn't know I liked opera. And I think that is case in point what Campbell was saying earlier.
All the time.
Yeah, that opera is just another genre of music, and classical music is just another genre of music to be enjoyed and shared with people.
Yeah, the short answer is yeah. We have. I'm hesitating because I'm careful with absolute words like never. Mm-hmm. But I think we have never failed to get an audience excited about this, which is pretty amazing to say with 80-ish shows a year over how many years now. Yeah. We do succeed in getting the audience excited and on their feet and cheering and stamping and clapping and singing along. It's a phenomenal feeling. And, it's the reason I stopped performing in the rest of the classical music industry. the very first concert we gave, we did a trial of the idea. And I remember it really clearly, standing up there singing the Toreador song. And the whole audience is on their feet, singing along, la, 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 clapping, and people are screaming and having a great time. And I had to think, I had two thoughts in my head. The first one was, how do I signal to the band, because we had a little quartet, a quartet on stage. How do I signal to the band that we're going to, repeat
Loop
it?
this.
Because this motion doesn't exist in classical music, right? And the second thought was, I never want to wear a tuxedo again. I never want to suffer.
Just on a date with your wife, not at a concert, right?
I never want to suffer through another concert where I have to feel a separation with the audience. I always want to be involved in engaging them. And so I still sing with other projects from time to time, but they are all of them in this same direction.
Yeah.
I would like to piggyback on what Campbell just said, because I think while I agree that we have always succeeded to collectively inspire audiences, we're not going to be everyone's favorite, and we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And I think that is also a very good thing, because if you're not upsetting people, then you're not really saying anything. Yeah. And there was a specific audience member who gave us a comment, in fact, gave us a bad review about the fact that we weren't pushing the envelope enough. We were still too classically minded in the way that we were presenting our themes and stories.
That drove us nuts.
No, it didn't drive me nuts. In fact, it actually caused me to reflect and go, whoa, maybe we aren't pushing this far enough. How can we go farther? And that was exactly the kind of kick in the ass we needed when we were developing our next show, because I always had that in the back of my head of, how can we push this farther?
As much as we get the audience as a whole involved, that's right. There are always people who don't like it for one reason or another. There are people who feel like opera needs to be this holy thing, this sacred thing. And, if that's what they genuinely really want, then awesome, man. But our show is not really for them.
Right.
There are people who, for one reason or another, won't like it. And that's okay. Yeah,
well, speaking of, pushing things further and wanting to continue in this direction, what direction would you like to see opera go into?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because I'm not necessarily going to speak on behalf of the cast, because this is a conversation that is still happening with the cast right now. We are coming up to a point of evolution, mostly because we've been together for so long now, and some of our team members have some longer life goals that they want to explore. So we are at a point in which we have a chance to evolve in a way that is not yet known. But for me personally, I've been thinking about this a lot. What do I want to see with opera? What do I want my next steps to be? How do I want to leave my mark on this art form that I love so much? And I have sort of funneled it down to, I want to create a collective that is going to power the next generation of classical music makers. I want to be the boost that people need to help develop their ideas, to help develop their projects, get the money behind it, and actually see them through to fruition in the same way that I did and that Cam did for the cast. We want to see more projects like this, because much like diversity in a team is fantastic, diversity in the industry is also fantastic. So we don't just want the opera houses and the traditional sort of locations where you're going to, or presentations of this music. We also want to see this sort of indie opera movement, but actually being supported in a real way.
Yeah.
So there are a few ways that we want to see the classical industry change. The first one is, we think there's a lot more room for independent and small groups that are trying new and different things. We have great experiments with opera on tap, with opera burlesque, with people. We have a friend who's a pole dancing opera singer. There's amazing stuff going on out there, and there needs to be way more of it. Along with that, that only happens when singers are allowed to be creative musicians. when the singers are actually allowed to be artists coming up with their concepts. And we'd really like to see the industry change shape from a small number of very large institutions presenting quite a traditional view, and even a traditional view of what innovation is, into a much broader spectrum of ways that classical music can engage with people.
I'm going to say it a little bit more bluntly than that. I really want to see a shift to a more flat hierarchy in music, whereby all of the participants in the production have a voice, including the singers, and that the singers get paid better, and that the collective industry decides to invest in its artists rather than just producing cogs that are interchangeable.
There was a model for the mid part of the 20th century in America, where theaters would pick up a promising young singer and develop them for years. At the Met Opera, there were singers that would be developed for 8 years, and it would be 3 years before they ever set foot on the big stage there. And they would be really careful and intentional about what are the roles that we let them sing, and what are the regional houses that we're partnered with where they could go and sing for that time. But it was completely accepted that this is a long curve. That was true in other genres as well, right? I'm reminded of Ella Fitzgerald, who was picked up as an absolute nobody because the studio said, this girl has something and we need to give her time and resources to develop, and she will be amazing.
I think this is one of the difficulties, because we do this with things like Olympic athletes, right? These are people who are starting at a very young age and they're training throughout their lives. Someone sees them and says, we need to invest time. And the family usually invests money in them, or they get sponsors, and they are developed through time. The difference in opera singing that is so significantly different from any other instrument or art form is that your prime in your life and in your instrument is around 35 to 40.
Yeah.
So you're talking about committing to a really long investment on someone, and perhaps their life goals change in that time. I'm not actually sure if that is a viable option for moving forward. But what I am certain about is that we need to figure out a way. We're already, at least in Germany, we're already providing a lot of state money to fund larger organizations and theaters that have been around for many years. We are not, however, finding a way to pool our resources as these smaller independent groups and projects in a real way that can bring us some real value and change. So that's really what I want to see, is finding out how to pool our resources, and instead of acting independently of each other, actually coming together as a collective towards achieving the same goals.
I'm reminded of some of the other arts and the way you have this incredible variety, this incredible diversity of things out there. On stage acting, for example, there are all kinds of small and medium-sized companies out there that do every kind of weird thing you can imagine because somebody had a vision that this could be amazing, right? That's the case in certain other kinds of music. But classical seems moribund. It seems absolutely stuck in the model of a few large institutions, and that's the only way to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be collaboration over competition. And there is so much fear. Yeah, there's so much fear that if you make room for somebody at the table, that somehow you're going to get kicked out. And I just think that I agree. I think that the table needs to be larger. I think that people need to be invited to sit down. I think that we need to invest in artists again. I think that I can speak from as an American, we have a very disposable society. We're a consumer society. And believe it or not, that's trickled down even into opera and classical music, where we aren't investing in people and we're not investing in their formation as artists anymore, because, as Campbell said earlier in our discussion, there's 40 people behind them. Why do we need to have like a long-term goal and cultivate this artist when, just like a fast food sandwich, we can just throw it out and get a new one? And that's not the type of art that we want to make. And that's not the type of art that's going to authentically connect with people, which we, throughout this conversation, said it's so important.
And it's self-reinforcing, right? We hire people because they are replaceable. If you have a really unique sound nowadays, it's damn hard to get hired. And some of that is maybe the people doing the hiring are afraid of hiring a really unusual sound, and some of it is maybe this is what their ear is now trained to listen for. Everybody wants to sound like this one particular sound, and classical singers are very fond of saying things like, oh, well, a Maria Callas would never get work today, and a Corelli would never get work today. It's probably true. And as a result, we don't end up with any of those amazing moving artists. We have instead people who were really facile in the beginning, and some of whom managed to figure out how to break out of that.
I don't like to get bogged down in classical music tropes, but there's a great Lizzo lyric of, if I'm shiny, everybody's gonna shine. And that's exactly the way I feel.
Ooh.
I help you shine, you help me shine, we all shine. And that's exactly sort of one of my founding principles behind the cast is I want to support myself with amazing and inspirational people who are incredibly talented, have something to say or something to sing. And that only propels me to be a better musician and a better artist.
Exactly.
So it's all a vicious cycle, right? We make people replaceable. We make the artists, the musicians replaceable. And so we don't end up with a lot of unique musicians. And so actually there's a ton of competition for every job because they're not interested in a specific tenor. They just want somebody to fill the slot and hit the checkbox. And therefore it's a zero-sum game, so everybody feels a ton of competition with each other, so they don't support each other and they're too busy undercutting each other.
I think what sometimes happens is, you know, we've been talking about how you guys are keeping opera alive and how you are reigniting that spark. We are sometimes, as opera singers, singing historians. We're not just telling stories, we're conveying history, and we're conveying techniques and practices that have been around for hundreds of years.
Right.
And getting people excited and getting people into the seats has been hard. And so again, getting back to this, you know, fear background, because, you know, oh gosh, how do we stay relevant? How do we sell tickets? You know, when you make decisions out of fear, it's never good. So what I think happens is when you're scared, you're afraid of taking risks and you're afraid of overinvesting. And I sometimes think, let's double down. Let's you know, make the right kind of risks. Let's make the right kinds of investments. If we make everything white bread just because we know everyone will eat white bread,
everyone's going to be gluten intolerant.
Yeah, I mean, after a while, it's like, why are you going to go? What's exciting about what you're seeing? But it's right. Bogged down in fear and safety, and the very thing that they're doing to try and ensure ticket sales is killing their ticket sales.
Is what's killing them.
They're creating their own demise.
That is exactly right. Fear is such a key part of the equation. Well, you know, when we bring a new person on to the cast, a new singer, because somebody's leaving or because we need a new substitute or whatever, it's one of the things that we've gotten quite conscious about is how do we break them of the habits that a lifetime in this industry have bred into them? How do we break them of this fear and teach them on a gut level that it's okay and desired for them to come out and just be themselves and do that really vulnerable thing that nobody told them to do? It just seemed like a fun idea at the time. Being an artist is about becoming increasingly true to yourself and your own impulses. And you can't do that from a place of fear.
I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a helpful point to your question, but one of the things that I've noticed, at least in this difference that we use between artist and musician, I have met many wonderful musicians and many wonderful singers who really want to be a part of a production. They want to have a role that they can sort of immerse themselves into and present. I find most of the time that those people do not actually want to present themselves on stage. They want to embody a role and become a vehicle for this music. And that is absolutely fine. That is wonderful. We need those kinds of musicians in the opera productions that we have. But where the cast occupies a really unique space is that we are really looking for musicians who have their own voice and who have their own characters that they want to bring to this music, which is a very different approach in how you're presenting when you're presenting a piece. So I think that has been, actually, you mentioned when we find a singer, we have to break them. I haven't encountered this problem so much in the recent years because we've been around now, because we have shows that people can come see more, that they can actually see what it is we do. I find that we're in fact attracting these people who were kind of
more and more, yeah.
They were like the square pegs in the round holes. They were conforming themselves to these shapes to fit into the industry and thinking, I have to do this because it's the only way. But then they see something like the cast and go, oh, wait, that's really what I want to be doing. Or, we work with people who kind of have one foot in both sides of the industry because they find, I need this because I still really love this and I love the opera productions and I love the costumes. I want to get dressed up fancy and sing this music. But then they also want to have a side of them where they have a creative voice. So it just boils down to at which way are you coming to this music? And that is where the cast is a bit unique or occupies a unique space.
Yeah, and I would argue that the cast, again, is advocating as forward-thinking as it is to kind of like, hey, let's get back a little old school. Let's think of Maria Callas. Maria Callas, when she was Tosca, but she was still 100% Maria Callas. She did not give up her essence to inhabit a role. And that's what we get hung up on as singing historians. We put these operas and these roles on pedestals, and we forget that they're living flesh, that there's passion behind them. And that's where if you can take what you guys are doing with the cast, which is saying, hey, you're an individual. What do you bring to the table? What's your fire in your belly? Where's your passion? Okay. Now that might present itself a little bit differently when you're playing a role, but that should inform every choice you're making when you're a different character. Otherwise, we're just little robots in a costume.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm hung up on the fact, Bryn, you said there's a place for that in the industry, and it's important to have that. And I'm less sure about that. For the people who don't want to put themselves into it, and they like being in the costume and they like being a cog in somebody else's vision. In other genres of music, you have studio musicians who are just exceptional players. Right? And they're there when you go to a studio and you need a backup band, you have a group of really good, honestly, studio musicians tend to be really good musicians,
You're
right?
talking one take kind of people. This is like live music, right?
Yeah, really fantastic musicians, but they're not there to create their own thing. They're there to be able to play anything that you can throw at them under the sun. And I guess there's a market for that in classical music, but not a ton. And when I think about other creative arts, like in acting, yeah, not everybody has to be Ian McKellen, but as audience members, we're always hoping to see a Sir Ian McKellen, and when we see one of those amazing performances where he just inhabits another human being, which takes an enormous amount of his personal soul and vulnerability, where we see one of those incredible performances, it is moving on a level that surface level people, the surface level performers can't touch. Mm-hmm. And the surface level performers generally want to be there. They're striving. We can't all be Sir Ian McKellen, but Keanu Reeves is doing his best to try and get there.
I just don't see it as a bad thing. I think actually it takes all colors of the rainbow, and it's all just different facets of an industry. And I think about it with the fashion industry. You've got the big name designers who make a piece that then inspires and informs the lines that are going to be presented all the way down the line to Target and Nordstrom. But not everybody can afford Chanel. So you have to buy what then later comes out and trickles down the line. And I'm just saying, not everybody can be a star. You actually do need, not everybody can be the main character. Sometimes you got to have the supporting actress, right?
Well, that's totally fair. All right, strike my previous comment, reverse it.
It's okay.
No, but what's so great is that, people are so ready to dismiss this art form. And clearly there's a lot to talk about. And clearly there are a lot of opinions and a lot of things that we can explore. And that tells me that this art form is far from dead, that it's still got a pulse. And you guys are doing no, seriously though. I mean, because people just get
Corinne, in classical music, we call it a beat. It's a rhythm.
Ching.
ching.
Actually, bum, 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 bum. Yeah.
No, but seriously, I mean, I don't know how many, articles I come across that are constantly saying, is opera relevant anymore, and these kinds of discussions, show that opera is indeed still relevant. And you guys are doing, all of, I lost you, Cam.
No, I'm sorry. I know what you mean, and I see those too. And immediately, the first thing that comes to mind, if you have to ask if it's relevant, it's not. But it doesn't have to, it means you're doing it wrong. Yeah. Relevance is the simplest thing in the world. Just be honestly you. Yeah. With the things that honestly concern you and honestly move you. Just that. Now, it's very hard, but it's simple. And if you're doing that, the relevance is not a question. Yeah. It only comes into question when you are up your own ass about the whole thing. It only comes into question when you are trying to construct something relevant. Yeah. Which will fail every time.
Yeah. Well, if people want to ignite their spark and get inspired and learn more about the cast and the two of you and your vision for what you have for this art form, where can they find out about the cast and your future shows?
Well, number one, easiest place to find us would be our website, thecastmusic.com. Mm-hmm. From there, you can go to our Instagram page, The Cast Music. You can see us on our YouTube channel. That's a little funky, but it's thecastde because we are a German-based company. And we're all over.
Because those things are hard to change once you set them up.
That's true. Some of those naming things we really should have thought of a little bit differently earlier.
I love our Instagram. I always send people there first because you get little interviews with the singers. You get great moments that fans send in from real concerts of ours. We throw on there pieces that we're just playing with. Little moments, like we do a cool arrangement of "Don't Stop Me Now" in the style of different composers like Bach. It's amazing.
Thank you, Misha Shapiro, for that awesome arrangement.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But anyway, I always recommend people Instagram.com/thecastmusic. Best place.
Okay, and this, on all of those links, all of the website, everything will be in the show notes, so it'll be easy for everyone to find. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, and it was really great just to talk about all of the stuff that we're passionate about, opera.
That's right. Right. The stuff that keeps us being good friends for so long.
Stuff that keeps us sane. Thanks a lot, Corinne. This was lots of fun.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Create Outside the Box. Please subscribe, rate, and share our podcast. You can listen to Create Outside the Box on Spotify, Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Check us out on our Creative Operations YouTube channel, where you can subscribe to watch our interviews. You can find and follow Creative Operations on our Facebook page and on Instagram at @CO_Creative Operations. For more information about Creative Operations, please visit www.creative-operations.org.